What's up, YouTubers? It's me, Johnny. It's pretty cold this morning. Got the hat on. I think yesterday it was 30. It's in the 30s. So here in Shela, Guatemala, it's starting to get pretty cold. Anyhow, when I got up today, I was watching this video by Nomad Capitalist. He had a video on how he was reading an article from Forbs on how the United States is pushing away more and more entrepreneurs and business people. Now, on the one hand, I was just thinking to myself, it's not a big deal because there's a lot of people coming and going. But actually, I think he had a good point, and the article had a good point. Apparently, there was a Malaysian businessman who almost got denied his residency visa despite investing hundreds of millions of dollars in the economy, which I thought was kind of interesting. I think now he's a billionaire, but apparently he was traumatized because the U.S. government didn't want to give him his visa. Anyways, what I was thinking about was Nomad Capital was pointing out how the United States is pretty dismissive of other countries when it comes to competing, like, say, Mexico. He was just bringing up the point that Mexico is actually considered a pretty well-off country, or wealthy country, and of course I know that and I understand that. But it's surprising because a lot of Americans think it's pretty poor and downtrodden, which is interesting because if you go from, like, say, Mexico to the Philippines or parts of Central America, Mexico is infrastructure is really, really great and much, much better than a lot of countries. Anyways, there was an article just to point out how there's a lot of misunderstanding about Mexico. There was an article about some of the migration, and there was a reporter in Mexico talking to a Guatemalan lady, I think, and she was working in northern Mexico to continue on her travels, and the Guatemalan lady said she wanted to go to the U.S. and didn't really want to stay in Mexico. And they asked her how much she was making, and the reporter was a little taken aback because she worked it out in her head what it was. It's basically $10 an hour. And now I know in the United States that might not seem like a lot, but I just point that out that northern Mexico has quite a bit higher wages than, say, southern Mexico, but it depends where you are and how much you're going to make and what your skills are. But my point would be, in northern Mexico, that's what some of the immigrants make. They make $9 or $10 an hour. And that is why in the United States, wages are starting to go up to 10 to 20 or 15 to $20 an hour. That's also why, in my opinion, why you're not getting a lot of people in the United States working for $7, $8, $9, $10 an hour, because the cost of living is so high. And I would also, to argue, there's a lot of opportunities that I hate to call it online, but for lack of a better term, online opportunities, metaverse opportunities, whatever you want to call them. There's a lot of opportunities to make money in the online world. So if you can do that, you're not going to probably stick around in the U.S. Anyways, Nomad Capital is just talking about that. Like, now more and more you can just go anywhere you want, and it's easy to start a company, easy to get a residency. And that's my second point. A couple of days ago, an acquaintance of mine mentioned in his video that he started a company, I'll just say in Taiwan. He spent about $4,000 for the whole process of starting this company. And the reason he started the company was mainly to get a residency visa in Taiwan. Now, I just assumed, because he's married, that he got a marriage visa, but I assumed wrong. So I presume that he got this before he was married, but I don't know. But it was kind of interesting because he's talking about it, $4,000, and he got a residency. That's not out of budget for a lot of people in the United States. They can, I don't want to say easily, but they can spend $4 or $5 grand, go through the process of getting a residency wherever they want in the world. The reason I bring that up is because a lot of times people ask me, what is the easiest way to get residency in Latin America? And it just depends what country you're talking about. And there's a lot of different ways. And it also depends where we are in the cycle, because in some countries, it used to be really easy to get education visa and become a citizen. Because of COVID, that's kind of changed now. And then on top of that, there's like what I call business visas, but they're not always business visas, but you use a local company to sponsor you to become a resident and then become a citizen. You can still do that, but more and more countries, I personally think countries are under pressure from the United States, the EU, to try to raise the barrier for that so less and less middle class Americans and Europeans can take advantages. Now, I may be off, but that's my opinion. But there's all kinds of ways, like from doing charity work to education visas to business visas, where you can get residency, not always citizenship, but at least residency, so you can have a legal place to live. And a lot of times, another reason I mention these things is because oftentimes, this is going to sound crazy, but I'll tell you why I always chose the business visas. Because sometimes they're cheaper than getting a retiree visa. And plus, a lot of people like me, and in the past, I'm not old enough. Usually, there's an age requirement, so I'm not old enough to get that. And also, too, in some countries in Latin America, not all, but in some, a retiree visa does not lead to naturalization. Some it does, some it doesn't. But when I was in my 20s, when I first went to Mexico, well, I went to Mexico when I was 19, but when I was in my 20s, early 20s, when I was in Mexico, I met this American. He had a bookshop in Mazatlan, and we were talking, like how it was to run a little business there and how he got his visa. And he just told me something. He said the reason he got a business visa is because, one, he was young and he wanted to run a business. But the other thing was, he said, the business visa, he worked it out, like the cost of actually getting the business visa was much cheaper than the cost of getting a retiree visa. Now, I realize some people are probably going to differ or think I'm wrong or disagree with me. That's fine. If you want to get into that, there's a famous YouTuber in Thailand that's talked about it. He gets a lot of crap because he chose a work visa, and a work visa is almost half of what the retiree visas are. I actually agree with him. When you look at actually how much money you got to pay, in a lot, not all countries, but a lot of countries, actually sometimes getting a work visa or an education visa or a business visa is much cheaper than getting the retiree visa. Now, he's in Thailand, and he made a couple of videos on that. And I don't agree with him on everything, but I would just point out, I actually think he's right. Now, in the past in Mexico, I don't know now because I haven't kept up, but this guy, I knew he got the business visa because it's way cheaper. And in his opinion, it was way more likely he'd get it too. And then on top of that, he didn't have minimum income requirements. But not back then. I don't know if that would be the case now, but that's what it was back then, and that's why he got it. Because the actual cost of getting the visa is much cheaper than the retiree visa. And the requirements to qualify were much, much less. Now, just to bring this up to date, there's a lot of people complaining online about how Mexico raised their minimum wage 22%, I think it is. AMLO raised it 22%. And for those you don't know, a lot of the visas in Mexico are based on what the minimum wage is in Mexico. So if that goes up, you need more income to qualify to get a visa to live in Mexico. I think now it's close to 2,200, and it might be going up to 2,500, something like that. So if you don't meet that minimum requirement, you'll have to look for another visa to live in Mexico, if that's what your goal is. But anyways, I would just say that that's always been the case, that in Mexico, the money you need to retire there to qualify is constantly going up because of inflation or because of the cost of living going up. And it's no conspiracy or anything. That's just how it's always been. But some YouTubers are talking about how all these countries are raising the requirements to get visas to live. And actually, I agree with that. Now, in Mexico's case, I just think it's just the cost of living. Other countries, I think it's the case that they're falling under pressure from the EU and the United States to make it harder for those countries' citizens to leave and go to another country and basically not pay tax or very little tax. I think that's becoming a big thing. I actually think in the United States that's a real big thing. I think that's why a lot of what's happening in the U.S. is because they don't really want the middle classes to leave. The wealthy have already left. Maybe they haven't left with their feet, but with their capital, it's already left. It's re-domiciled offshore. It's already tax-free. Now they're worried about the middle classes doing that. So I think that's part of what's going on with COVID. Also, too, I think it's just part of the government doesn't have a lot of money left to pay for all these social programs. So that's another thing. Anyhow, I was going to add something else, but I forgot. I'm going to keep this video short. I got to go out and do some stuff. Let me think now if there's anything else. Yeah, no, Nomad Capital is talking about how basically the gist of the video is, which I agree with, is the United States isn't really the center of the world anymore. A lot of Americans don't realize that. And I'm not bad-mouthing the United States. It's a great place, in my opinion, to start business, to work, but not necessarily to live. But now that we can do things offshore, now that you can just make an LLC in the U.S. pretty easy. You don't even have to live there. You can just do it all online, or you can have someone else do it online, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And these things can be set up mostly to be tax-free, so you can just live wherever the hell you want. So I think that's the way the world's going. But what's really happening in the world with everything being online now is there's all this competition going on. So like Nomad Capitalist was talking about, you can domicile a country in the Middle East, in Asia, in Latin America, in Europe. You can get a visa to live in those countries. And if you do the proper tax planning, you don't really have to pay that much tax. Now, in some countries, it'll be tax-free. Some countries, you'll pay very little tax. Other countries, it'll be harder to manage not to pay tax. But still, if it's your goal to live in, like, say, Ireland, it's really not that much compared to the U.S. But for me, I don't want to live in Europe, and the cost of living is a little bit higher there. But even for people who do, you have a lot of options now. You can go to Canada, you can go to Ireland, you can go to Western, Eastern Europe, you can go to Asia, you can go, like a good example that people don't really recognize, and I might make a video on this, is Taiwan. Taiwan and Korea are like first world countries that are tax havens that most people don't recognize. And you pay very little tax or no tax depending on what you do and how you set it up. But even when you do pay tax, it's usually only 5 or 10%. And there's really not a lot of paperwork to comply to do that. And the rules and regulations to comply with all that is very little, unlike the U.S. where the sanctions are really high if you make a mistake. Anyways, in Taiwan, before the United States put on all their offshore rules, you could basically bank there tax-free and have a lot of privacy. Now, that's not true as much anymore. It's really difficult to open up a bank in any country now. But in a place like Taiwan, you can make really good money. You can quite easily live there very affordably. You can get apartments for $400 or $500 in really nice neighborhoods, safe neighborhoods. You can, if you know where to shop and do stuff, you can, like some restaurants or like, let's just say the street stalls, they're $2 or $3 are only really $1 if you know where to look. So my only point of saying all that is you can live really, really cheap there. You can get an apartment for $400 or $500. You have like the 7-Elevens and the stuff like that. Offers takeout food and junk food. It's really, really cheap. And it's a real safe country. There's a lot of opportunities for outside activities if you like to go hiking and stuff like that. And you can make, in my opinion, not quite a bit. It depends on your skill sets, but if you don't have a lot of skills, you can make as much or more living there than you would ever make in the United States. It's going to be very, very lightly taxed. And if you have the legal papers to work there, you can open up a bank account and start a company there really cheap and get a bank account that way. And you have a lot of investment opportunities you just really wouldn't have in the U.S. But even that's kind of changing because now with everything being online now and international brokerages, you have not the same but very similar opportunities as far as that goes. But in the past, you could bank there and have the opportunities that Europeans have and Asians have as far as allocating your capital. But anyways, that's kind of beyond the scope of this. But you can live there very affordably. In fact, if your skill sets are pretty good, you can go there, you can get places less than $400 or $500. I'm just pointing out if you want an apartment, but you can live there you can get places stay even cheaper than that if you know where to look. And then you can earn income basically tax free. Again, I want to point this is if you're doing stuff online. You can also do stuff where you get cash. That's again beyond the scope of this video, but for people who are willing to do that, you can basically fly there, live there 3 to 6 months, live there really cheap, save up, 5 or 10 grand to travel if that's what you're going to do, or to make investments or whatever you want to do with your money. But anyways, My point is you can do all those things, and it's very relatively easy if you have a first world passport, just to fly in there and get set up. It doesn't cost you a lot, and that's like what I would consider first world country, where everything works fine, cost of living is low, it's very safe, and it's a country that most people don't really talk about. Korea is another one, but Korea can be expensive. It can be quite polluted and things like that. I've had quite a few relatives who lived there before, and there's workarounds and all that stuff. But anyways, if you do have skills, these countries you can go and live, earn quite a bit of money compared to the United States, save it up, invest it, and then move on with your life. That's just my point on that. But now with the way things are in Latin America and Asia, you can really live anywhere. You can live between countries if you want to, which is more interesting to me. But anyways, that's it for now. Like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment, and thanks.